Hello, I'm James Warren.
And I'm Andy Cushion.
And this is the Denver Urbanism Podcast. And today, we're walking the 5280 Trail.
Yes. Yes.
Hi, Denver Urbanism listeners. It's me, James. Let's talk about change. Our city is changing. All the time and seemingly everywhere, the streets, buildings, and people that make our city Denver are changing shape and form to consistently redefine what it means to be the Mile High City. This is, to me, one of my favorite things in life. I know that's true of Andy too, who runs a Twitter account called Build Up Denver, and it simply focuses on new developments. And really, that's the point of Denver urbanism and Denver infill in general. I get so excited riding my bike past any new change in our city. New buildings means new neighbors for me to meet. Maybe someday there'll be new friends. New landscaping means new opportunities for the bugs and birds to flourish, as well as chances for me to appreciate the beauty of nature in our city. New street designs often mean safer routes for me to travel on my bike or by foot. And these designs often come with cool features that I've read about in design manuals but haven't gotten to see in person before. Essentially, these changes often mean that my life is improving, and I'm excited about and grateful for that. We don't always nail it, but I think we're taking 2 or 3 steps forward for every step we take back around here. This is all the more true for the big changes in our city. Colfax BRT is going to transform how people use a definitively Denver roadway, and I can't tell you how excited I am to see mixed-use development where parking lots used to surround Ball Arena. One huge change in the mobility space would be the full build-out of the 5280 Trail. If you're not familiar, this would be a 5.28-mile loop around Denver, connecting various cultural and commercial points with high-comfort options for those traveling by bike or by foot. Loads of people have worked on this plan, and you can read more about the details online. I'll drop a couple resources in the show notes. But for all I had heard about the trail, I had never walked most of it. I asked Andy if he'd want to walk it with me and record a podcast, and he said, well, why don't we open it up to others as well? Make it a community event. So that's exactly what we did. On a hot mid-August day, 30 to 40 folks from Denver and the greater Denver area came together to walk with us, some of whom are urbanist nerds and some of whom had never heard of the 5280 loop in the first place. As we walked and saw the promise of the trail, we stopped to hear various speakers articulate thoughts on the 5280 trail, and I recorded interviews with our walkers to find out one central thing. What would such a trail mean to them? This podcast is an arrangement of those interviews. It's clearly a little different, and the audio can be a bit messy. You'll hear dogs whining, cars driving, and people talking in the background, and I recorded it on my phone, but I hope you enjoyed it anyway, and maybe learn a thing or two about what this trail means to fellow Denverites. I started this by talking with the councilman for the district, Councilman Hines, who was kind enough to join us for a portion of the walk that went through Golden Triangle, which is one of the neighborhoods in his district. Here's what it means for somebody who has to represent many views in a very diverse district. Well, I'm here with Councilman Hines, who's joining us for the first portion of the 5280 Trail. Councilman, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I just wanted to ask quickly, you represent this neighborhood, and so I think you have a much more maybe holistic vision and understanding of what this trail could mean for the residents. If you could briefly talk a little bit about what you see this doing for the people of your district.
Sure. So Golden Triangle is in some ways a microcosm of Denver in general, in that people are moving from all over the nation and beyond into Golden Triangle. Sometimes they're leasing without even knowing what Golden Triangle is, or, like they lease a spot in Golden Triangle and they've never been to the city at all, much less the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And so I see this community gathering space as a way for people to get to know one another, kind of like you might have a common space in an apartment building, but this is a common space for the entire neighborhood. So let's develop community. Let's get some fresh and healthy food, maybe a neighborhood garden. Let's highlight and lift up the locally owned businesses that are along this route that you can get to without a car and without putting your life, on the line, trying to dodge cars. And so I see this as a pretty fabulous way to also improve physical health and be closer to nature. So, if it's pedestrian entirely, then the podcast folks won't see all these scooters in the way, but there are scooters blocking the sidewalk. If we get rid of cars entirely, the scooters can have somewhere else to go.
Okay, anything else you wanted to add?
No, I think this is a fabulous project. It is, again, the highest polling single project in District 10. So the biggest comment I've heard is just build the four-letter word trail already.
If you made it through that audio, thank you. That's the last time the dog features so heavily, I promise. It was great hearing from a city councilperson and hearing what he has to say about the future of the trail. That said, he represents the district. He's going to be very interested in big upgrades that are going to affect his residents' lives and commutes. So next, I went to talk to somebody who had no representative stake in Denver. She doesn't even live in the city, but she still cared enough to show up and walk with us on that hot August day. I wound up chatting with Danny McLean.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Danny, what part of town do you live in?
So I live in Lakewood, right over by the Sheridan Light Rail Station. So right on the border with the city and county of Denver, actually.
Okay, so when the planners are thinking about connecting neighborhoods, they're not talking about your neighborhood, right? They're talking about Denver. They're talking about some very specific portions of Denver. But you're still out here. What does the 5280 trail mean for you?
Well, I have to say, so I work at RTD, which is the local Denver metro area public transit agency. So multimodality is very important to me, and supporting alternative forms of transportation that are not reliant on cars to get around. And so for me, being here today is in support of that, right? And it's a way to be out in community. And that's something that I love about this topic of alternative transportation, about pedestrian mobility, is that it creates so much more community than a car-dependent society and culture, really encourages. So I would say that's part of the reason that I'm here today.
Connectivity, multimodality, what's that all about and why does it matter to you?
Oh, why does it matter? Well, number one, I think it makes people happier and healthier, right? We get out of our cars, we're more connected to each other. We see the trees. We are walking on grass right now. Two, I think it has a lot to do with justice, right? Like, not everyone can get around in a vehicle, and they should have the opportunity to get around safely, securely, on foot, on wheels, on bike, etc. So for me, it's multifaceted, and it's something that everyone should have access to.
I couldn't have said it better than that. Multimodality really is something that everyone should have access to. I love the positivity of the interviewees so far. There's so much hope in what we can build in this city, and a lot of visionary people envisioning it. For a lot of residents of the neighborhoods where the 5280 trail is supposed to go, however, some of this feels like a lot of hot air. The city has promised that everyone would get access to that multimodality, and some people feel let down. At one of the places along the trail, we listened to Nolan Hahn, president of the La Alma Lincoln Park Registered Neighborhood Organization. We heard him chat about how the neighborhood sees the project and what he views as a city failure to make good on mobility promises.
This is one of our loudest stops, as you can see. Santa Fe is still a very busy car route. People coming off the highway and going up to downtown. But welcome here to Lincoln Park. When Andy asked me, he sent me a list of questions that were like, what does the 5280 trail look like in your neighborhood? And what have they talked to you about? And what is happening? And the answer to all those things is nothing. Nothing is happening, as you can see. There are no signs. There is no plan yet. There is nothing. I talked to some of the older folks in my neighborhood. They said in 2016, people reached out and there were some meetings happening about the future of the 5280 trail. I think it's been almost a decade, so we're hoping for something at some point. Yeah, as Andy mentioned, here on Santa Fe, you can see the paint and post here that was installed a few years ago. So that paint and post is going to be replaced with actual concrete. We're going to get some wider sidewalks here. As a part of that design, which they are still working on, there is currently no bike infrastructure at all planned. If you think maybe that's a mistake, please contact the city. Because if we're going to get a lot of people coming down here on bikes, it would be great to have places for them to put it and have them be able to access the great businesses and art galleries here on Santa Fe. You heard really positive things from Hines. I'm here to give you the neighborhood side of we're real skeptical. We don't see anything. We'd love things. We would love people to get here on Santa Fe safely in other ways than cars. As you all know, cars are a geometry problem. We can only have so many cars that come to these businesses, and we need people to get here in other ways if we want these places to thrive. So please reach out to people like Councilman Hines and encourage them to finish this project so we can actually get people here. That'd be great.
It's discouraging to see all these amazing promises and feel that nothing is ever coming of them. By contrast, it's wonderful to envision a place where people can gather, but it's another thing to make it a reality. And that bit, the placemaking, is so very important. Next, I chatted with a Denverite named Saigo Paul about his view on the importance of placemaking and what the 5280 trail might mean for those who lack a place to simply be.
I live in the CBD, like right downtown, by 16th Street.
Amazing. Okay, so this is your neck of the woods. 5280 trail goes around where you live. It would presumably affect your life in a way that it might not affect people in the far northeast or the far southwest corners of the city. What does 5280 trail mean for you?
You know, I think having more public spaces where people can walk and congregate is going to really transform downtown and downtown adjacent neighborhoods. I think in the long term it will be a huge positive, and I think having third places would make a huge difference for our city.
Talk a little bit about third places for our audience and maybe explain what it is, and then also how third places might be brought into being by the 5280 trail.
Yeah, so third places are essentially places where people can congregate, meet, share ideas outside of the workplace and home. And I think what we've seen over the last few decades is a lot of third places have been commodified, where they end up being places of like where you have to spend money, whether that's a shopping mall or a coffee shop. So having third places that are public plazas where people can just come congregate will make a huge difference to just one, accessibility. You don't have to look or pay a certain amount to have access to these spaces. And two, I think having these third places will create more reason and impetus for people to come downtown and celebrate the area, even if they don't live here. So I think it's all about generating more foot traffic and helping revive the area after the pandemic era downturn in foot traffic.
Third places are crucial in creating a city for everyone, no matter who they are or what background they have. I can see the 5280 trail being just that, as other outdoor walkable places already are in our city today. The concept of a third place comes from the idea that we need and have three primary places. The first is our home, the second is where we work or study, and the third is some free communal gathering spot outside of the first two. But that order is important, and having first places, homes, that are affordable and accessible is foundational to everything else in life. I managed to snag some time on the walk with Ryan Keeney, who helps lead a group called YIMBY Denver that advocates for more housing in our city, hoping to see what connections like this trail might mean for housing advocates like him. Okay, I am here with Ryan Keeney. Ryan, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Hello.
Ryan, you're really involved with a group called YIMBY Denver, and I can let you talk more about this, but it's a group that advocates for more housing density in our city. And I think the nexus between housing and mobility is an interesting one. And so my question is, from the perspective of housing, why is mobility and connectedness, why is that important?
Yeah, so the 5280 trail, just like any other piece of multimodal infrastructure that allows people to walk or to bike, exhibits synergy with housing density. And I know it's a very corporate sounding term, but I like that word because it really fits well with this.
Yeah.
In order to practically walk and to practically bike, you kind of need to have things be close together. Because when things are really far apart, it's just extremely inefficient to walk or to bike. It takes too long to get to different places.
Yeah.
But when you have a greater housing density, that means A, there's more residents that are close together, and B, those residents can support a greater density of businesses and destinations. And so by building a piece of infrastructure like the 5280 trail, you can connect these destinations, which ring our downtown of our city, which showcase a lot of some of the best urbanism that Denver has to offer. And in this way, modeled after the Indianapolis Cultural Trail, it especially highlights it more than you would say a typical bike lane or a typical improved sidewalk would.
Heck yeah to that. Let's get more housing in our city, and let's make it connected. So far, you may have noticed that I've spoken to a lot of folks who are urbanist-minded already, using terms like multimodal, synergy, and third places. You may even know some of them, like Ryan, from their advocacy around town. But on this walk, we had a decent amount of folks who had no idea what an urbanism even was, and had just responded to the meetup event because it looked fun. I wanted to talk to some of those folks too. That includes Diana, who's new in town, and who I spoke to next.
So I'm gonna be honest, I just moved here in the end of May.
Okay.
So I'm still pretty new. I'm still not in the know of everything.
That's amazing.
So I just came on this walking trip just so I can see like what it is. I've honestly never been to this part of the town before.
Okay, so tell me more about that. You're new to town,
Yes.
You're here walking on this 5280 trail, and you're seeing new parts of the city.
It's really beautiful. Like it's great. I moved here from outside of Atlanta. Denver's way better than Atlanta, I gotta say.
I'll take it.
The fact that I can walk is amazing because over there where I was living in Atlanta, no sidewalks
Yeah.
at all. So car only. If not, you're just stuck in the house. You're just a slave to your car over there. So it's really nice. It's refreshing to just be able to walk and have a trail, and also just the transportation. Just is pretty way better than Atlanta too.
As somebody who's new and exploring this city, how important is the walkability? What is that? How does that change your real experience of being a new person in the city?
Well, so I grew up, born and raised from Jersey, like right outside New York. So I'm used to like being able to walk everywhere, and like you can just, it's amazing just to see like new parts of the city without having to like worry about parking. Oh, I gotta be back at the meter at this time or else I'm gonna get a ticket. So this is nice not to have to worry about that. Yeah, the sun and everything, yeah, it kind of kills me, but and the elevation took a while for me to get used to. But honestly, like it just makes me love the city way more because it kind of makes me feel a little homesick. And it's like a little slice of home just to be able to walk around and just to like see everything and meet new people.
What could be more beautiful than that? Being in a new place, yet feeling that it embodies a little slice of home, simply because of the walkability. I feel that deeply too. I think it's something that we all feel, that walking through a space helps us feel connected to it, and to the other places we've lived and walked. Why is that? Well, I turned to the venerable urbanist expert, Ken Truppel, who some of you may remember from episode 2 on historic preservation. He was able to offer a very interesting perspective on why the 5280 trail is important from a historical perspective, and also what it might mean for the future.
Hey, it's great to be here. I enjoyed my visit back a few months ago to talk about historic preservation, and I'm really excited. I'm enjoying our walk today.
Well, I wanted to ask you, you think about this city all the time.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody who thinks about this as much as the mayor in terms of how we are constructing the city that we live in. And this podcast is all about city building. So when we think about the 5280 trail in the context of city building, why would we do the 5280 trail as opposed to any other project?
Right, it's a great question. So in terms of city building, humans have been building what we think of as cities. So large settlements that are kind of reach a critical mass that kind of rises to the level of a city. We've been doing this for about 6,000 years. And during those 6,000 years, for 98% of the time, all of the cities we built during that time were pedestrian oriented because that was how almost 100% of the population got around. So we have as a species a legacy of building cities entirely around the pedestrian. It's only been this last 2% of the time where the automobile has been the driving force shaping city building, particularly in the United States. So the 5280 trail is an example of how we can return back to our human legacy, our roots as city builders, and start to reclaim streets as public spaces for pedestrians, bicyclists, and in some cases, perhaps still permitting, vehicles to come through, but really reorienting how we're building and designing our cities around the pedestrian. When we started shifting this orientation to automobiles in the kind of the post-World War II era, we did it in a way where rather than just finding a way to maintain the pedestrian focus of cities and still accommodating motor vehicles, instead we simply just flipped it upside down and we just started changing the whole way we design cities to be all about accommodating cars first and foremost, to the detriment of pedestrians and bicyclists and other users. So this is really part of a bigger, more systemic change in city building in the United States and worldwide, to going back to reorienting the design of cities to be about people, not large vehicles.
Reorienting the city away from cars toward people is a big task, but it's a really important one. It will reduce noise and pollution in our city, connect places and people, and improve safety. The car dominance of the city is a big reason why people move to the suburbs to raise a family. But that wasn't true of Anthony Gemma, who I saw pushing a stroller on the walk. I wanted to hear what the 5280 trail meant for his new family, and more broadly for connecting neighborhoods.
There's a ton of parks that are in reasonable walking distance, but there's not a ton of parks like right in the neighborhood. And so to me, the 5280 trail represents a way to get to some of those parks that are further away, by foot or by bike. And B, it offers kind of like a linear park experience that, since so much of the downtown is these right-of-ways, it's a way to take back some of the space and turn it into park space, essentially.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about sort of what connectivity means for you?
I mean, I think it just connects a lot of the reasons that make living in a city so great, whether it's a family or an individual, but just these different pieces of culture and character that are, dispersed throughout the city. It's a safe and exciting way to get from one to the other and really take advantage of what Denver has to offer without being kind of pigeonholed into one neighborhood. Some neighborhoods really are kind of isolated by themselves, and so I think the more we can get creative with how we connect them, the better.
As someone who lives in Denver but whose neighborhood is not connected to the 5280 trail, I really hope we can continue to get creative about linking neighborhoods, as Anthony put it. There really isn't a better expert in this creative linking than Ellen Fortover, who works for the Downtown Denver Partnership and helps build momentum around the 5280 trail as part of her day job. She spoke to us at one of our stops along the walk and helped paint a picture of how the trail plans came to be, what steps come next, and what is being done to move these steps forward.
My hometown is Indianapolis, Indiana, and I actually began my career at the Indianapolis Cultural Trail. So I've seen firsthand what a project like a multi-mile linear park in the downtown core can do for a city. One of my favorite quotes from one of my favorite restaurateur and business owners in Indianapolis is that the Cultural Trail made Indy a face-to-face city, and that's my hope and dream for what the 5280 Trail can bring to Denver. We were the group that really brought resources and led a lot of the efforts in 2019 to create the vision plan and design guidelines for the 5280 Trail with community support. So that outlined the conceptual route of the just over 5-mile trail connecting 6 neighborhoods. What's super unique and interesting about the 5280 Trail is from the beginning, the whole idea of the 5280 Trail was actually born out of there are very special and unique places, gems, pearls, if you will, in our downtown neighborhoods. How can we elevate those, highlight those, honor the uniqueness and specialness of them while elevating them by connecting them with a similar design characteristic and materialities on the full trail? So on this stretch in particular, I'm sure you can feel it right now, shade is a really, really big concern and big thought. The 21st Street segment is about a mile long, so about a quarter of the 5280 Trail future footprint is here on the mile-long stretch of 21st Street. In 2017, the partnership, along with community leaders and partners, did several demonstration projects over the course of a month. It was called The Square on 21st, so type that in Google, see some of the awesome photos and pictures. We had murals, we had silent discos, we also had opportunities to weigh in on what you would like to see the future of the 5280 Trail be in that area. That then led to, in 2021, a conceptual design process, so getting up to that 30% design mark or so, led by the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, which outlined that along this about mile-long stretch, there's a lot of different contexts, right? Right near Coors Field, that wants to be a festival street environment, somewhere that we can easily close to have a gathering space on event days. In kind of this middle section here, there's a lot of businesses, residences, as well as parking lots, so potential redevelopment opportunities. That might look more like a shared street, right? And as it gets closer to Benedict Fountain Park, the community really called for access to greenery, to a park, how to better connect into Benedict Fountain Park that exists already. So you can look online to see the results of some of the community input, both as part of the square on 21st and the conceptual design process that Dottie led. But really exciting. I've heard some movement on potentially looking at green infrastructure improvements to start getting the curb in the right place, kind of as that next step towards full construction while final design and construction funding is being identified. Two other things that I will add, and then I'm happy to pause for some questions and let you get on your way. One thing, as you walk towards Benedict Fountain Park on 21st Street, you'll notice the crossing at Broadway feels a little different than many of the other just signalized crossings. That's because following the Square on 21st activations and demonstration projects, one of the main things that we heard from the community is that people use 21st Street as a means to get from one side of town to another and to get to and from Coors Field. So hearing that and recognizing that Broadway was one of the biggest barrier crossings in that path, Dottie actually installed, as part of a stormwater and green infrastructure management project, a better and more easy crossing, prioritize people walking and biking at 21st and Broadway. So make sure you take a look at that. Worth noting, that is not the final vision of the 5280 trail in terms of the paver set design and all of the trees and plantings and furniture, but I would argue it's very much in line with the overall vision of the 5280 trail and what we're trying to do. Connect communities, remove barriers, make it easier to get around, and do what I like to say of my hometown project, the Cultural Trail, the lazy river of biking and walking.
So many good insights from Ellen. The lazy river of biking and walking, a face-to-face city, that's beautiful. It's aspirational. And I share Ellen's hope that this trail can help create that in Denver, even for those who aren't plugged into the planning process. I was brought face-to-face with Crystal Worth, who had no idea about the 5280 trail before seeing the meetup event, and got to hear what the space means for her, and how she would like to see it develop.
And I'm from here originally, so I know a lot about Cap Hill. I used to live on Cap Hill myself, so I had no idea about this.
Yeah, okay, that's awesome. So what has been your impression of the 5280 trail? What do you think it could mean for the city?
Bringing communities together, because a lot of communities come together with sports or music, and I think this is something that could bring us healthier. We are already a healthy state, but I think this could bring the community together and possibly have different maybe 5Ks or different festivals, different ways of promoting and having other parties to sponsor this trail. Yeah.
Absolutely. So would you consider yourself somebody who's really into biking and walking?
Yes, I cycle, I bike. I used to live on Cap Hill, so I love... I used to live in Portland, Oregon, and a lot of things from Colorado, like Voodoo Donuts and Dutch Bros, came from Portland. And so Portland is a more walkable city, so I think it's becoming more of a walkable and bike-friendly city for Denver, yeah.
And last question, what would it mean for you for the 5280 trail as a walker, as a cyclist? What would it mean for you?
Connection, and then I think it'd be nice to have like little painted ways to kind of show the way versus just a map, or have little like notifications, like when you're on a trail in the mountains, there's like little pinpoints of like, hey, you're on the trail. So rather than always, so I think that's a good idea, but I think it would just mean being more proud of my city.
I'm proud of my city. And like Crystal, I hope to grow more proud of my city. I'm proud of what we stand for and what we've built. That building is sometimes metaphorical, building a strong sense of community, say, but a big piece of this is also literal, building skyward and reimagining how our streets look and feel. At our last stop on the walk, we heard from Stephanie Protzman, who who is an architectural and urban designer at Tribe Architects, and who is helping reimagine some of the right-of-way as they develop the space.
As we continue to talk about this redevelopment, one of the things that excites me the most is actually the right-of-way here. So, Emery, I have a question for you. Where did she go? Emery is my stepdaughter. Do you know what a right-of-way is? No. Yeah. Most people don't actually know what we're talking about when we're talking about the right-of-way, right? The right-of-way is the space between the parcel on one side, generally privately owned, and the parcel boundary on the other side of the street. So when we're looking at this space on Sherman, we've actually got 90 feet. We have that on Sherman and we have that on Grant. It's a very unique circumstance in the city because almost everywhere else we have 60 feet in the right-of-way. So in this location, you've got an additional 30 feet that can actually be made into something incredible. And that's one of the reasons, not only the historic underpinnings of this street, but the amount of space that we have is part of the reason this stretch has been included in the 5280 trail. At Triba, one of the other studies we've also been undergoing is an analysis of public realm space owned by the city, which means that it's also owned by us, the citizens and the taxpayers. And in this analysis, we have come to recognize that as citizens, we own roughly half of the space in this city. So it's pretty remarkable when you think about the amount of square footage taken up by buildings. We also own the other half. So one of the questions we're trying to push within the city is how do we better use the space that we own, because we think we can be a lot better at it. And the 5280 trail is a phenomenal example of actually recapturing our space and making it into something that we all want to use. One of the last things I will leave you with is an anecdote from a trip that I took to Indianapolis to review the Indianapolis Cultural Trail. So a few city leaders were there a couple years ago, and I'll tell you, one of the things that I noticed that I haven't forgotten even years later is we were out on the trail. It was April, I believe. It was a Thursday morning, 10:30, and we're out on a trip similar to this, and 20 or so kids come by on their bikes. And I'm thinking to myself, as a stepmom, what are these kids doing? It's 10:30 on a Thursday morning. Aren't they in school? So I asked the question to the presenter, and he was like, no, actually they're in gym class. Oh, wow. In the middle of downtown Indianapolis. That is something I can't even imagine happening here. But if Indianapolis can do it, we can do it too. And that's the kind of city that I want to live in.
That's the kind of city I want to live in too. The promise of the 5280 trail is the promise of a new type of city, one we can build together. I know you haven't gotten to hear much from Andy this episode. Don't worry, he'll be back in full force for the next episode, so I'll let him have the last word on the trail.
You know, there's clearly so much potential and so much opportunity for people to enjoy this kind of environment. And there's action happening behind the scenes, even if it's not really visible, to make something like this happen. My name has been Andy Cushion, joined with my friend James here, co-hosting Denver's Urbanism podcast.
And we hope you enjoyed. Be sure to subscribe, check out the long-standing blogs at denverurbanism.com and denverinfill.com, and we'll see you next time.
Let's give ourselves a round of applause. That was a very hot section that we walked